Welcome back to an intro to 3D animation. Today we're going to go into more details on keyframing, on using some different classic animation techniques like squash and stretch, and just a following through on a deeper introduction to the graph editor. So we're going to create a bouncing ball. This is kind of a classic squash and stretch lesson. It's going to involve a floor and a ball. So let's just go ahead and set that up. I'm going to go to poly modeling here. I'm going to grab a plane. Let's make it the size of my grid. That's fine. And then I'm going to grab a sphere. And I'm going to go to side view here just so I can get it exactly so it's like sitting right on the plane. Whoop, wrong one. Let's grab the sphere. Not the... Oh, dang it. There we go. And while we're in here, because we're going to be kind of bouncing the ball and stretching it from the bottom upward, we're going to move the position of its internal axis. So I'm going to hit letter D, and I'm going to go ahead and move that right down to the bottom of the sphere so that my internal axis is at the bottom, not in the center, because otherwise it would stretch kind of from the middle. And you'll see what I mean here once we get started. So that should be good. I'm going to come back to my perspective view. I'm going to click on my sphere here, and just so we can kind of see it a little clearer when it squashes and stretches, I'm going to add a checkerboard shader to it. So I'm going to add a new material, AI standard surface, and I'm going to go to my color attribute here, and I'm going to put in a checker pattern. And to make that visible, I'm going to go to shading and hardware texturing. Very good. And just so if we do decide to render this, excuse me, down the road, I'm going to go to the Arnold tab, and I'm just going to go ahead and add a sky dome to this whole thing so we have some light in the space. All right, let's go ahead and move the sky. Whoop. Hit D on that again. Oh, I had the sky dome. Sorry about that. Let me hit the sphere here and move it over so we have a little room to work with. All right, so couple of things as we move forward. We're going to just stick with those standard attributes. I am going to show you some techniques for setting keyframes on all sorts of different attribute options. But right off of the bat, we're going to kind of follow through with what I taught you using the kind of Maya Classic environment here, the classic animation environment. But we're going to explore ideas like anticipation, which is the squash part of the animation. We're going to talk about follow through, which is the stretch and return. And then we're going to talk about general timing, trying to find a rhythm and controlling the speed at which our animation moves, right? So right off the bat, I am kind of right around keyframe number 1. I am going to go ahead on the sphere and set a keyframe. So if I go to the P sphere, you'll see I have set a keyframe for translate, rotate, and scale, right? And if I want to, I could go ahead, I'm just going to lay out without any of the squash or stretch, just sort of a bounce, bounce, bounce animation here, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and move to frame 5. And I'm going to go ahead and bring this up in the air and over a little bit. Set another keyframe. I'm going to go to frame 10 and bring it back down. And actually, I want to go back to frame 1. And let's just see where we are at. So we're at roughly 1.002. I'm actually just going to set that to 1 to make it easier on the Y translate. And let's set that again just to make it even so we always know we're coming back to 1. And let's go ahead and go to the next. So we're up in the air. I'm going to kind of give myself just so I can see a general height on this. And then come back to 10 again. And move it over just a little bit more. And set it back. And we can just dial that into 1. And set another keyframe. So now we've got kind of a, if we play through, it's a hop, right? It's not really a bounce yet, it's just like a hop, hop, hop. So we're going to repeat that a little bit more. We're going to move to frame 15, move over, and move up. I'm going to try and go a little less each time. So if I go back, let's go keyframe at a time. On the first one, I came up to 2.46. Let's change that to 3. Hit return and hit S. click on that guy first, hit S to reset the keyframe. And then 10, we're at back down to 1. So if I was at 3 the first time, I'll go like 3, 2, 1. So it's kind of a bounce, bounce, bounce. You know, so it's getting smaller each time. And that's how we're going to start to imitate some of the physics of an actual bouncing ball, right? So let's go to the next frame and 10, and then we'll go to frame 15. And actually, let's look at the distance it travels each time too. So if we're going up 1 and then we're going over, so in this first one, we're at about 8 on the I think that's on the Z depth. So let's change that to 8, just have a nice round number. And I'll hit S. And then we go to 6.7. Let's just go to 7 and hit return and hit S and lock that in. And then on the next one, we'll go to 6. Click on the sphere and hit S and reset that. So now we're kind of going in these increments, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, you know, and 3, 2, 1 on the vertical. I'm just trying to get this even. That doesn't have to be this perfect. I'm just kind of setting it out your first time for you. Okay, so now we're going to go to 15. And this time we will go up to, or over to 5. And up to 2. And let's go ahead and set a keyframe. So far, so good. So boom, boom, boom. Boom, 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 boom. Okay, cool. Now we're going to go to 20. And then we're going to do it one more time. We're going to go over to 3. I'm sorry, down to 1. And over to 4. Click on your sphere. Set another keyframe. And, yep. So we'll go one more. And then we're going to go one more. 25, and we'll set this to 3, and we'll set this one to maybe like 0.5 since we were already, I'm sorry, 1.5. Click on that and S, and then one last one at 30. And we'll put this back to 1 and take this over to 2. All right, let's step through this. Up, down, up, down, up, down. Perfect. And you can see how those increments are changing. It's a little mechanical right now, like if I actually play it. But it's getting there. You can almost see a bounce, bounce, bounce. And then at the end, we're going to add a roll that's going to kind of like roll down the table, okay? So let's go back to the beginning. So that's starting to get our timing, our rhythm, our speed, so setting kind of increments. I could make it go like faster, faster, faster. So instead of just like bump, 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 it could be like bump, 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 bump. You know, where the last couple smaller bounces take less time because they're not bouncing as high in the air. But that's something we'll tweak here in just a little bit. Let's bring in some of the ideas of squash and stretch, though, of the anticipation and then the follow through. Okay, so right off the bat, before we jump into the air, we want to have like a little wind up. We want to, this is a cartoon, right? So we want to have it's just kind of like taking a step back before you launch off to run, or reaching back with your arm before you throw a punch or before you throw a baseball. You have a wind up, right? So that's that anticipation idea. So we want to bring that in here, right? So I'm going to hold down Shift here and grab all these keyframes. And I'm just going to move them over a little bit to give me some room. So we'll go ahead and bring them over to the 5. So I have a few seconds here at the beginning before those keyframes start, right? So what we're going to do is, we haven't set anything for rotation. And I'm going to go ahead and save this just real quick. So squash, stretch, animation. Send this to my desktop. There we go. So let's do a little wind up. First of all, we're going to go ahead and rotate it just a little bit, right? So we're going to go ahead and rotate it just so it has like a little tilt to it, because it's kind of heading in that direction from left to right. So it's kind of like back up and then boom, 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 and then it's going to roll. So we'll go ahead and set a rotation here. And then here's why we moved the inner axis point to the bottom, because now when I go to compress it a little bit, it's compressing downward. Instead of from the center, it would look like it's hovering above the ground. We want to kind of, give it that little bit of a wind up. And so now I'm going to go ahead and set a keyframe. And then I can move to the next keyframe where we have the same position here. And actually, I think we'll go ahead and we're going to swap some keyframes here, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and grab this keyframe and delete it. And I'm going to move this keyframe into I'm going to copy it and paste it. There we go. So now we have a kind of a scale back and boom, and then it's going to jump. We can almost see it there already. So in this first keyframe, let's go ahead and take that scale back to 1 and hit return and set. So now we have a little wind up and then launch, right? So we have the kind of like starting in this position, scrolling down, and as a matter of fact, I might even try bringing that rotation back. Let's set that back to 0 and come here and let's see how that looks. There we go. That might work. We'll see about the rotation. We might leave the rotation in its position, but we'll see right now. It's part of that anticipation. Now when we get to this next part, we're down to the bottom of its squashing. Then we want to kind of stretch out, right? So we want to go to frame 10. And in this position, we want to kind of match the rotation at least, or go a little bit further, right? So let's see, what did we have? We had rotation of roughly -18. Let's just give that a round number. Let's give it let's just give it -18 instead of 18.8. And set. And then maybe we go to like a -20 in the next frame, right? So we're going to go to -20 on the rotation. There we go. Just a little bit more. And then we're actually going to go ahead and stretch it out. So instead, it's almost like the reverse. Like first it squashes and then it stretches when it's flying through the air. So we're going to bring that up. Let's bring that as high as like 1.3. There we go. We'll click on it. And let's go back and see what that looks like. So we're getting there, right? We're starting to get a boom, boom, boom. It almost, because we stretch at the beginning, almost gives you the illusion that it's stretching the whole time, but it's not right yet. I'm going to go to my playback speed. Just wanted to make sure I was on real time. Cool. Okay, I'm going to save. So we now have the wind up, the launch, the stretch. And now in the next one, it's coming back down. So it's already going to come back down, which is nice. So now it's when it hits again, we're going to want to have it squash back down again, right? Because it's only going to hit for a second. So let's go back and look at what our squash was. We were roughly at a -18 value. Then we went to like a -20. And our scale, we went down to a 0.703. We could just say 0.7. Let's reset that. And then we'll get back down to that 0.7. Maybe on this next one it squashes a little more. We could say like 0.5. So let's go up. 0.7. Let's go to like 0.5. And let's just see if we keep the rotation going, almost like it's continuing to tumble forward. So let's go to a rotation of like -22. You know what? I don't know if that's going to work. I think actually we're going to go ahead and let it kind of like fall flat and then rotate back forward again. Let's just put that back to 0. Because otherwise, we might actually get a little tilt out of it. Let's give it like a -7. There we go. Or actually, you know what we could do? We could do a 7 the other way, almost like it's hitting, and then it'll rotate back when it goes the other direction. So it's kind of like tilting back and forth as it's bouncing. Let's see how that looks. I'm going to set that. There we go. We're starting to get somewhere, right? So let's go ahead and go back. We got to this frame, up in the air, rotating back down. If I scrub through that, you can see how it's like up in the air and then coming back down and bouncing and then coming back up again. Now in this point, we're definitely going to want to have it like rotate forward again at frame. Looks like this guy's off a little bit, where that one, we're off a little bit on our frames, but whatever. That's fine. Actually, it looks like we're just off by like 1 frame on a few of these, but whatever, that's fine. So now that we're back up in the air, let's see, we are at 0.5 on the stretch. We'll go back up off of this guy. We are on the scale. We are at a 1 and a 0.5. No, a 0.5 scale going the other direction. Okay, cool. So let's now get it back up in the air. Stretch this guy back up. Maybe not as much this time, where this one we were at 1.3. Maybe we do like 1.2 because it's not jumping as high in the air. So let's do 1.2 on this. And let's go ahead and rotate forward again. Let's go with like negative 22. Give it a little tilt again in that direction. And let's see how that's looking now. So compress, shoot up into the air, stretch, squash, stretch, squash, and then we have 1 more to go, okay? So each time we're going to go a little less now on the amount that it's squashing. So actually on this one, I probably should have, I went 0.5 on the second one. The first one, we were what, 0.7. So maybe this last one we'll do a 0.3. Whoop, sorry about that. Didn't mean to render that out real quick. All right, 0.3. Let's go with that. Oh, I'm sorry. 0.6, I mean. 0.3 would be smaller. Yeah, I think actually we want to go a little less each time. So let's go like 0.8. I actually kind of messed that up on the last one. And let's go ahead and rotate this as well. We'll give it a slight tilt, like maybe a 4. So tilting back as it goes. Yeah, this one we should have done less of a squash. So where like this one was at 0.7, let's do like 0.75 on this one. Okay, we're going to go back. There we go. And then we go to 0.8 on this one. And then just so we can see where we are at with the stretch here, we are at a 1.2. So maybe we go to like 1.1 on the last stretch of the bounce. So 1.1. And also, where were we on the rotation? We were at roughly negative 22. Let's go to like negative 24, because the rotation is increasing, I think. We'll see how it looks. We might scale this back. And let's set a... Oh, yep, we had lost our... Let's just check one more time. 1.2, we're going to a 1.1 on this one. Sorry, I hadn't set the keyframe, so we lost the stretch. There we go. Let's set that keyframe. And then we have one last stop, right? So we're going to come back to here and just maybe a little squish, and then we're going to have it continue to roll forward. So I think on this one it kind of hits, it doesn't roll back again, but just continues to roll forward. So like on the last one here, we were at negative 24. Maybe this one we do like negative 26. And just a little bit of a scale. 1 point, maybe 0.05. Oh, wrong direction. Let's do like 0.9. Yeah, that should be good. And hit set. And then we're just going to go a little bit further down the road here. We'll go to like frame 50. And we're going to move this over a little bit and kind of have it roll to the end. In this case, we almost want it to go back on its position. Yeah, this one's going to be a little tricky. I was going to have it roll forward, but because I have the rotation in the center, that does make it a little trickier because I'd have to like bring it up and down. So I think I'll bring it back. We'll just have it plant and stick. And we'll do a little kind of fatten back out, right? So let's get that back out on the rotation. And as a matter of fact, maybe it's like let's rotate it back this way just a little bit when it sticks. And that was the like 0.95, maybe 0.9. Set. And then we'll just go a few frames forward, like maybe 1 or 2 frames forward here. We're at 34, let's go to like 36, and we'll just have it straighten out and stand up. So let's see how that looks. So put this back to 0, and put this back to 1. Yeah, let's see how that looks. Not too bad. I think we could continue with a few more like hop, hop, hop. I think also the tweaking of the rotation could be a little bit better. It's a little like, I don't think I quite got that. I don't think the tilt back was as necessary, maybe the tilt forward. Or I could just have it hop straight up and down each time and not even have it really rotate that much. It's not too bad though. I think for a quick little run through of what that looks like, it's not too bad. It's almost got like a little liveliness to it, like it's hopping itself across the table from one position to another, right? So, something to think about as you're starting to play around with these ideas of anticipation, stretch and return, and then the timing and rhythm of everything. So I also want to show you just what this looks like in the graph editor and talk about the graph editor a little bit more. So let's go ahead and right click up on workspaces, and let's go ahead and come down to animation. All right. So now you're getting kind of a visual representation of some of the motion that's happening here. And unfortunately there I got, let's go back. I somehow lost my perspective view there. There we go. And let's click on the sphere. Whatever you click on, it's going to show the keyframes in the graph editor for. I don't have any keyframes on the plane, so when I clicked on that, it was empty. But if I click on the sphere, you'll see I have, it's kind of showing you every keyframe for each parameter that we're working with right now. But in reality, we're working with, like, that would be my X translate, my Y translate, which we're actually seeing it move vertically quite a bit, right? So left to right, this is the keyframing, but up and down is the value on that keyframe. So like, what is my Y value at keyframe 4 versus keyframe 9 versus 14 versus 19, etc. And then same thing on Z. There's a little bit of a Z depth. I was moving it just a little bit in depth as well as on the Y. And then obviously on the rotation, I have a little bit going on as well, right? So there's that like initial like roll back and then up and rolling and rolling and rolling. So that's something we could play with if we want to get rid of that. So there is that little X roll going on, but no Y roll, no Z, no X scale. We do have the Y scale where it's stretching and squashing, and then Z, there's nothing really else going on. So we have a couple of parameters we're working with, mainly the Y scale and the translate scale and a little bit of the rotate X. So those are really like you can hold down Command and select, and you can just see those three on top of each other. But ultimately, I like to look at them individually so you can kind of see them full scale. Now, say I just start with my X, or I'm sorry, my Y translate, my Y position. I can go to the timeline here and I can zoom in and out on it just like I would in my regular viewport. I can also hold Option and the middle click button and move back and forth just to kind of navigate where we're at, right? So I can zoom in on a keyframe or zoom back out. And what we're seeing is kind of like anytime you see a curve like this, it's sort of like a slow ramping up of motion and then a slow dropping back down again. If these were sharp points, it would be way more jagged, more linear of a straight line, and that would just be like, that's like kind of before we did a lot of the like smoothing in and out. But you can play with this as well by playing with these tangent handles. You know, I can change the curvature of these and actually tweak the animations quite a bit by playing with that. And if I want to move them on the timeline to different positions, well, then I can move left or right, but you really have to be cognizant about not moving up and down, because that's going to change the value of like how high it's moving up and down, right? So if I'm going to click and move that, make sure you're staying on the same line. Sometimes if you hold Shift, this one it's not really snapping for me right now, but and when you have groups of them, you can hold Shift and move them, and they will kind of snap along that same value line. But I can click on each one here, and you see how I actually get the value of it right there. So I can see that's at 1.002 as an X value. That one's at 2.989. So if I wanted to change that, I could type in 3, and that's actually going to bump that up and change the value of the keyframe. I don't have to hit set again on that one. And this one back to 1. So again, I could change this little one that has a little tweak in it. Sometimes you just see little reverberations, and it was just an accident. You like moved something a little bit, and maybe I want to keep that one at 1. As well. So I can kind of move through each of these and check their values. And say I come back to 1 at keyframe 14, I come up to 2, back to 1, up to 1.5, back to 1 again, right? And I can even grab these and say, no, I want this one. The keyframe 5 was right on that one, but I want this one at keyframe 10, you know, and I want this one at keyframe 15. And then I could say, you know, I could speed this up over time. Maybe instead of 20, 19's good. And then maybe instead of 24, I keep slowing these down or speeding them up, 23. And then bring that one back to like, I don't know, 27. Kind of speeding these up. And then bring this down to 30. And then this one to 32. And now I'm changing, but keep in mind, I should be doing this to all of them, right? Because the vertical, now it's not going to line up quite with some of the other things that I'm doing as far as position and rotation. So just be warned when you start moving positions that you do them to everybody at the same time. Otherwise, you know, you might really mess with the timing of your animation. So again, if I want to get all of them, I can always grab all of these guys and kind of see them together and make sure that all my timing is right. So you can see where like really important keyframes are lining up. You know, if I want to change their positions, maybe I grab them all and I say those all go to 20 instead of 19, right? So just be warned, you change one and you don't change the others, and you might really significantly change up the timing. I can move that to 15. I can move all of these to 10, etc., etc. Okay, those ones are all on 5. So I'll leave that there. Let's see how much that changed it. There we go, not bad. Now, if I go back to just say the the Y value on that, I just want to show you some of these different handles and kind of what happens. So like right now, I have a nice kind of Bezier curve right now. I have an in and an out to it. It's got these kind of auto tangents that are going on. And so these are different ways of kind of creating, like if I want to turn that into a linear, now that's not good. It's just going to go like boom, boom. It's going to go straight up and then straight down, right? So if I come here, oops, sorry. If I hit the play, you can see it didn't like flow as easy. It just went boom, 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 boom. Like I could go in and change all of these to linear points, and it's not going to be nearly as smooth. Boom, boom, boom. So anyway, the squash is kind of hiding that a little bit, but it's making it way more of a linear kind of animation. So I'm going to undo all that and get that back to a curve. And you can bring in more subtleties, like I said as well. You can kind of stretch these. You can play with the handle lengths and really, or the angles of these, and really kind of like have it like build up a little bit more, like ramp up beyond where you want to go with it, and bring more subtleties into your animation. So that's where you just get a lot more control over both the values, the positions of the keyframes, and then also the sort of ease in and ease out of each keyframe as well. And that all comes together. That's like the same thing on the scale here as well. If I want to play with these values, I can play around with them, I can tilt them, I can do all sorts of things, right? So there's a lot of controls in here that you can play with. And you know, if you want to change something that's linear to a spline, you can change it to a spline. You can, you know, be very flat and linear. You can have more steps to it. You can add plateaus to areas. There's just all sorts of different things you can do. And we'll get into some of the more advanced features as we go. But I want you to understand how to navigate this world a little bit. You still have the main timeline under here as well, but this just really allows you to get granular and really see the motion at which things are happening. So, you know, if I wanted to get rid of the y values on this, these are all more standard flat y values. I could come in, so if this one is set to -18, I could come in and set these all to 0 and flatten them all out. And now I don't have any of that rotation anymore, right? So if that's something that I just decided like, yeah, that wasn't worth it, let's just have it bounce up and down, that's fine too, and I can get rid of them all. So it's a really like quick way to like keep your values, or I could significantly like lower the rotation that's happening as well, and just, you know, bring up some of these values. So I could bring this up a little less and a little less, and drop this down, and raise this up, and drop this. Well, I probably don't want to go below 0, but raise this up a little bit less. There we go. And just see how that looks. Maybe it's a little more subtle rotation. That actually helped a little bit, I think. So this is the art of the timing and the subtle little shifts of rhythm and speed on all of your different values of your x, your y, your z, your scale, all of that stuff. It really all comes together and is important to think about. Okay? Let's see if there's anything else I want to show you today. I think the last thing maybe is just that if we come back out, any parameter on an object, any attribute can pretty much be animated in an interesting way. So I'm going to go back to Classic here for a second, just so I have my attribute window up. You know, I've got all sorts of different things that are happening on an object at a given time. So I'm going to take this back to the beginning. And, you know, if I do shear or something like that, you know, I'm going to take that back to 0. 5 was pretty extreme on that. But maybe I want to do like a 0.5 shear or something like that. That's not something that would normally get handled just by the S parameter. That's something you're going to want to right-click on a value and hit Set Key. Then you see that a keyframe has been set for your shear parameter, right? So there's lots of different things like that. We're going to get into this a lot more with like changing colors and doing all sorts of different things. Like, you know, I could come into the AI standard surface, and right now I have, let's see if we can play with, yeah, so like right now I could come into this guy, and on this #1 keyframe, I could right click on the black value and set a key. And then on my next keyframe, I could change this. I could like gray it out, and then right click on it again and set a key, right? And then go one more keyframe and bring it back down again, and right click and set a key. And you're going to see that it actually did that over time. It went by kind of quick, but I actually just animated a parameter on the texture attribute, right? So there's a lot you can do in here. And if I go back to my animation tab, you know, we've got all sorts of different things we're working with, and we can come and look at our object here and see it over time and keep playing with it. So we'll get back to this in the future here. Like I said, there's a lot to work with here and a lot to continue learning how to explore how to animate things. But I want you to realize, because there are some various elements that we're going to continue to work with, and we're going to want to be able to control everything from like textures to lighting to various controls. And you know, that's how we're going to be able to start to set keys on some of these various attributes and play with them over time and all sorts of different things like that. So I'm going to leave it there. I just wanted to bring that in because the next tutorial talks about how to use like a squash deformer instead of how to do the more traditional kind of scaling squash like I showed you. I'd like you to explore both for sure and see what you can come up with. But there's, you know, all sorts of different things in there that we can play around with and figure out, you know, how we're going to move forward. So I just wanted to show you, I brought up the hypershade so that I could select the AI standard surface texture, and you'll see there's that keyframe that I just set. So this is coming in here and playing around with that parameter that I set on the black and white material, right? So that was the color 2 parameter there that we worked with. So by selecting that, I had to go select the texture on that one, and then I could get in here and see its keyframes in the graph editor, and then obviously I could tweak that over time. All right, everybody, we'll stop there. Enjoy playing around with some of the more subtleties. Start to check out the graph editor, and we will go from there. Thanks for tuning in.